All right, friends, welcome to week 3. Can you believe it? We're already 3 weeks in. That's wild. Day 2. So that day 2 means it's an algorithm day, which is really fun. Um, just a little bit of housekeeping. We've got some discussion questions. We have a discussion question that is due this week. So please make sure you go do those. You should have all gotten an official, sort of like an official check-in this week from Clayton to kind of let you know your status. So if you have any frustrations with that, please let me know. But make sure, again, if you're retaking, you're resubmitting assignments, because it's going to look at all the assignments submitted during this class period, not ever. So please make sure you're redoing that. Speaking of core assignments, if we look at our class sheet, you've got some core assignments. Here we are with OOP. And you've got some with user and then user with bank accounts. Now we kind of looked at MySQL Workbench, or you're supposed to sort of read through that. Next week, we're going to talk about database design. Now, if you were on a Mac and you were on Sonoma, which is currently myself as well, there's going to be some differences. So I will teach, I guess real quickly, Estrella, Kevin, are you guys on Windows? Are you on Mac?
I'm on Windows.
Windows.
Windows. Okay, cool. Ooh. You guys are on Windows. Cool. So Jeffrey and I've got a Windows computer. So I will teach probably next week on it. And then just to show you, and then Jeffrey, you and I can meet or talk in office hour or do something to kind of make sure that we can walk through the database design with us in our walkthrough. So I'll send you some information on that.
Yeah, that would help.
Yeah, of course. Because there's different ways to do it. But yeah, so and any of the assignments like the ERD, Jeffrey, will just work together to figure out the most optimal way to do that. Cool. So yeah, you have 2 core assignments and a discussion question. Please make sure you do those. And then I was out sick, obviously, on Tuesday. You guys know that. So thank you for your patience. Thank you to Nathan for filling in. I'm trying to track down. Apparently, there were some issues with the recording. I'm trying to track that down. And once I get that, I'll put it on our class sheet and let you guys know. So that'll be there hopefully tomorrow. Okay. We got a fun one today. So this is going to be our first algorithm that is going to sort of simulate. Now, this is a simpler algorithm because our knowledge isn't there, right? We haven't done simulated linked lists or graphs or trees or any of that. But this is going to be similar to kind of what you should expect whenever you are preparing for a job. I mean, the style of question, not necessarily the content. Again, this is a little bit more elementary, and though I will say it's not going to feel elementary. Eventually it will. But right now, it's probably going to be hard. That's because you guys are learning. But again, the same style and question is there. Okay. So I've got this algorithm here, and this is what we can expect, right? You're going to have some long, arduous question, and you're going to have to basically, again, interpret what they're wanting or what they're asking to do. We'll do some pseudocode today. We'll start building this out, see if we can get to a answer for today, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so the question is, lovely Burbank, California has a breathtaking view of the Los Angeles skyline. Let's say you're given an array or a list. I'm going to change this for Python, with heights of consecutive buildings, starting closest to you and extending away. List -1, 7, and 3 would represent 3 buildings. So each building is represented by a number. First is actually out of view below street level. So anything negative. So we can imply anything negative is below street level. Behind it is second at 7 stories. And third is 3 stories high. So each number correlates to how many stories there are hidden behind the 7th story. You are situated at street level, which we're going to assume is 0. Given or you're situated, return a list containing heights of buildings you can see in order. So really, here's the question, right? You're situated on street level. Return a list containing heights of buildings you can see in order. Given this, so -1, 1, 1, 7, 3, return 1 and 7. Given 0, 4, return 4. As always with challenges, do not use built-in list functions, list methods, such as unshift. I'm just gonna take that off because there's no list. Okay. So what we're wanting to do is write an algorithm that we're going to have some information, right? We're going to be needing some information given to us. And if we are at 0, we're given a list. We want to see all of the buildings are containing the heights of buildings you can see in order. So if we're kind of starting, the far most is the closest building. The far right, or the last one in my list, is the furthest building. I think we should pseudocode a little bit. What do you think is the first thing we should do? What are we doing here? I think we'll just do this as a class.
I think we use list
Yeah.
equals to the -1, 7, and 3.
So this
Well,
is just an
no,
example.
actually, yeah, sorry. We're gonna do the given, the -1, 1, 1, 7, 3.
Okay. Yeah,
That's the
we'll
one.
use that as our tester. But what's the first thing we're going to do just to make sure that this works? What is it asking us to do? We're situated, return a list containing new heights of buildings you can see in order. What am I going to use to evaluate this list and then return something? What am I going to use to do that? Start very, very elementary if we're trying to solve this. We're going to create a function. Does that function have any parameters? Think of a parameter as, is there anything our function needs in order for it to operate? Think of this right here.
I think we'll have some conditions in there.
We'll definitely have conditions, but at the beginning, we're setting up just we're setting up our function, and then we're saying, what does our function need in order to operate? Does it need any parameters?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, exactly. What is it? What kind of parameter does it need?
Well, so the buildings are consecutive. That means just one right after the other.
Mm-hmm.
And then each of those numbers represents a building. Is that correct?
It is, yep. And each number is the number of stories of that building.
So how could a story be negative?
It says the first one is actually out of view below street level. So think of like a basement. Maybe it's a yeah, like a basement or a subway sort of thing.
Okay, and the second one is the second and the third one are one story each, and then 7 stories and 3 stories respectively.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what it's saying is if your function is given this, it should return this is the right answer, 1 and 7. And if it's given 0, 4, it should just return 4. So first and foremost, we're going to create a function that takes in a list, right? We need to get our building sizes operable, right? In order for us to do that. Cool. Now, before again, we want to make sure we're thinking through this and we're outlining this before we just start going into what the conditions are and all that. Let's take a very elementary look at it. What it's saying is you're situated at street level, return a list containing new heights of buildings you can see in order. I'm going to say new list because one thing that you might get is return a new list or return a list changing in place, meaning that you're changing this, you're not getting anything new. But let's just say a new list for right now because we don't need to worry about in place. Okay. So I'm going to create a function that takes in a list. Once I create that function, I need to be able to return a new list, right? So what should my next step be?
So the three wouldn't be there because the seven is in front of the 7-story building, is in front of the 3-story building, and you can't see the 3-story building, but because it's shorter.
Yep. Same thing with this one, right? It's situated behind this one. So you won't see it.
We're going to have a greater than or less than an inequality sign for sure.
Yeah, we will.
We're going to have a loop.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe I'll just put, I like that idea. Before we pseudocode, we know that there's some things, so elements of function. We're going to have comparison. Values. We're going to have some sort of loop. What else are we going to have? Anything else you guys can think of?
Well, like I said earlier, we're going to have some kind of a condition.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Estrella, Jeffrey, you guys thinking anything?
Have some sort of loop, comparison values, elements of function.
I'm just looking at how you guys are kind of deciphering it.
Yeah.
So I knew it was gonna have comparison because of the numbers and the heights of the building and stuff, but I wasn't sure about, like, I figured the condition would probably be from the numbers initially given on the -1, 7, and 3, just because of the way they broke down the views and the heights.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking that like the condition would be. And obviously loop because we have to go through each building.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is a great place to start, right? I think these are all the elements we're going to need, right? We're going to need some sort of comparison value. We'll need to figure out what we're comparing. We have some sort of condition. And then we are going to have some sort of loop because just like you said, Estrella, we're going to need to see every value. So let's hop back to my, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so is this one of those situations where we could have a default parameter?
You wouldn't have a default parameter because you need a list. Great question. You need a list in order for it to operate, right? And so you wouldn't want to use this function if you didn't get a list, because then what do you? Then it has no use, right?
Well,
Because you're just
create a function that takes in a list. So basically, couldn't the list be our parameter?
Yeah, the list is going to be our parameter. We just don't have a default. A default is like if we weren't given a value, right? If we weren't given this, then let's default to something else. But this function's only used when given, and we're wanting to see what specific buildings we're able to see, right? So we don't want to give a default value because we're saying no, in order for this function to run or for us to actually show what buildings are going to go, you have to give me some
Mhm.
buildings. I can't just give you some random, numbers or random buildings because you could
Right.
be anywhere in the world.
So like and we're not it we could have like as many values in the list as we want, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So I was thinking maybe we would write like DEF and then our
Okay.
function name,
Uh-huh.
DEF function name, and then we would have whatever that name would be, and then we would have our parentheses and then the name of our parameter, and then we could set
hmm
that equal to just some open brackets for just our some arbitrary list.
So I see what you're saying. You're saying def skyline heights. And then you're saying listy equals, and you're saying this. Now
Right.
remember, yeah, remember this, what I was communicating is this is a default parameter. You're exactly correct. But we don't want to run, this tells us nothing, right? Because if we're not comparing, if we just have this and that's what's passed in, this function's not doing anything because we're going to return just an
Okay.
empty bracket. And so I like where your head's at, but we will say, hey, no, we need to have some sort of information for this to actually be of use, right? Because then we're
So
just giving you nothing.
okay, but in order to create um a function that takes in a list that's
Mm-hmm.
just some arbitrary list, we would like maybe beneath that, like within the actual function itself, we would set the list equal to some brackets, open brackets for a list.
Well, so listy is going to represent like whenever I call skyline heights, and then I say, this.
Okay.
Remember, listy just is what we're calling this or whatever value when the function's called. We're just saying, hey, this is the function name. It's going to give you a parameter, an argument, and then I want to refer to that as listy. So if I were to do this,
Oh, I see. So listy represents any parameter or any
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 any any
value
list,
passed in. Mm-hmm.
any
Any
actual
value.
list passed in. Okay.
Yeah. So if I run this, oh, oh, whoops, wrong one. Spelled Algo incorrectly. Okay. So if I run this, you can see that listy just represents this value. But if
Mhm.
I change that, now listy represents that value. Listy is just the name. This can be anything. It can be unicorn.
Okay.
Oh, see.
Right. So you could give it any name,
Yep, and it just represents whatever value is passed in. Now, let me
whether
kind
that
of
whether it could be just a number, an integer, or a list, or uh, a
anything.
dictionary.
Yep.
Even it could even be a dictionary. It could be anything.
So look, now you see unicorn when in this function call, unicorn represents this. It prints it, and I get unicorn. In this other function call, unicorn represents this one. It prints it.
Okay.
But like you said, if I were to just just do a number, unicorn's
Yeah.
just going to represent that. If I were
Okay.
to say,
Or it could be a string or a
mm-hmm,
Boolean, a true false value could be anything,
yep, it
including a
can be
dictionary.
anything. It's just representing what our function is taking in.
Any data type, whether it's primitive or a composite.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Exactly. Good clarification. Okay. So I like to pseudocode. So we've said we want to create a function that takes in a list. Great. What are we wanting to do? We're wanting to return a new list containing heights of buildings you can see. So let's break down this line right here. Return a new list of heights of buildings you can see
Hmm.
in order. This line right here tells us everything we need to do within this algorithm. So first off, we need to create a new list, right? So I'm going to say visible. I'm going to say create a new empty list called, I'm just going to make it visible buildings. Because that's what I'm going to end up returning. Right? Now I've got this new list. We're not going to return it yet, but now I want to new list containing heights of buildings you can see. So with this heights of buildings you can see, which one of these do you think I'm going to use? Am I going to do a condition to start, right? Remember, we're going out and then in, kind of like an onion. What do I need to do? Do I need to first create a conditional, or do I need to loop through and then check with the conditional? Do I need to do a comparison? How do I do this?
I think we're gonna do a loop
Yeah,
with the condition.
I would agree. Cool. Now, and the whole point of this pseudocode is sometimes you kind of go back and you think of something and you go, oh, nope, I need to add this or I need to create this. So it's okay if we go back and add something to the top or whatever. Okay. So we're going to loop through and iterate through the buildings. We're starting at ground level, which we've said is 0. Now we said we're going to iterate through, and then we're going to create a condition, Estrella, right? That's what we said.
Yes.
Cool. What is that condition? So I'm going to say create a condition that compares. What are we comparing?
Sorry, I have the below because the given is with a negative. So we'll have to start from the negative to the highest, which is 3. So we'll start at -1 being what is it, the below street level. Then we'll stop at 8 because it ends on the highest building is 7, I believe. And
Remember,
then
we're starting here. So
street level. That's what
so
I
we're
said. Start with the 0.
start at 0.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Because we're gonna, I think that obviously since we're gonna be doing the loop, we're gonna start at 0.
Uh-huh.
We're stopping. I had said 8 because it says the second building is 7 stories high. Right? Where did I read that?
Yeah, remember our loop? We don't have to do range here.
Okay.
Our loop is we're looping through these values right here.
Okay.
Right? So we're going to look at all of these values right here. So we're wanting to see if we're starting here, we are going to compare, can we see this building or not? Right?
Gotcha. Yes. Gotcha.
And so
Yeah.
what is the value if we're starting at 0, what gives us that we can see a building? What numerical value would say, yep, we can see a building?
The one.
What, well, what if it went like this? Remember, this has to work for
So
all
gotcha.
things. So if we're at street level, think about yourself, right? If you're out on the street and you're at street
Yeah.
level, if it's flat, if it's at 0, you're not really seeing it, right? Or if it's really, there's not a 0, there's either -1 or 1.
So
But
when we
really,
starting,
go ahead.
I said then, yeah. So if that's the case, the first one you'll see will be the tallest one, the
Yeah, in this
highest one.
case, in this case, it would be, yeah, for sure. Let's say that this was 3. What we're looking at, thinking about real world, if we were to go out and we're at street level, anything greater than street level at the beginning, I could see, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So what we want to do is first compares, is the building greater than 0? Right? Okay, cool. Because at the beginning, we're just saying, if this is all negatives, then we're not going to get anything. But there's a second piece in this. Let's go back to 1 here. Where if this is 1 story, let's say I walk out and I have a 1-story building and behind it is another 1-story building and I'm looking directly at the building. I'm not looking on the side or anything. Am I going to know that a building is behind there?
No.
Not at
No.
all.
But when I get to the 7, I will, right? Because I'm going to be able to see 7 stories. It's taller.
That's true.
And then if I get to the 3, it's going to be blocked by the 7, right? So how could I keep track of, okay, I see this 1, therefore I'm going to skip this. But then 7 is greater than 1, so I'm going to add this, just like this. How am I going to keep track of that? Any thoughts?
I'm like thinking about it because that's why I was thinking of it as in range,
Yeah.
and for that reason, just because of, we're gonna be going through the buildings, but it obviously doesn't say all the buildings are like in that order, like
Yeah.
that. So you kind
What
of
is a
stopped me on that
tool?
one.
What's a tool we use in coding to keep track of a value? Think of very, very simple. What's a tool we use? It talks about it day 1.
Mhm.
Just to keep track of any sort of value. Could be a list, a string, a number. If I want to refer to it later on, what is a tool I could use?
You're talking about index.
Not an index. Remember, index is just the position of a list. I'm talking very basic. If I were to say X equals 3, what is this? You guys know it.
I'm
What is this
like,
called?
I know you say it.
an integer.
No, that's the type. A
I
type
think I have
of.
notes of this. I think you said it on. Yeah, I think I have some notes of this.
It's a
I'm
variable.
looking,
Huh?
a variable.
Yeah, you guys know a variable. Come on, you're killing me here.
So is
So a variable is what we can keep track of, right? We can use that to keep track and refer to it later. So what if we use that in order to keep track of how big our building is. So we're creating a function takes in a list. Cool. We know that a variable, we're not going to create a variable before that. That doesn't make sense, right? Everything's going to be confound with our function. Create an empty list called visible buildings. That's fine. What if we come here and we say before my loop, and we say create a variable called biggest. Well, biggest building could be called, it doesn't matter, you know, X, it doesn't matter. Now, why would I want to create it outside of my loop? Actually, before we answer that question, what is my value going to be? Where am I starting?
You're starting at 0.
Exactly. Right? So anything at the very beginning, anything greater than 0 is going to be the biggest building I've seen, right? Even if it's just one story. So great job, Estrella. We're going to start it at 0. Now, the reason I create a variable outside of my loop is because if you declare a variable within a loop, every time it iterates through, it's going to redeclare that variable to 0, right? So we're going to lose track of if the building's big or not, or if we've already seen a bigger building or a smaller building. You know, whenever we run it, we'll show you how. I'll show you. So we've created a condition that compares if the building is greater than 0, and so it needs to pass 2 conditions, right? Is the building greater than 0? And what's the second condition relative to what we had here? We come here. Is this bigger than 0? Nope. Cool. Is this bigger than 0? Yes. Biggest is going to become 0 or become 1, right? We're going to get to the second one and we're going to say, is 1 greater than 0? Yes. What's my second condition in order for me to add it to my list? Can I see this if it's the same as this?
No,
No. So does it have to be bigger than this?
I think so.
Yeah, Jeffrey, it is. And it's got to be greater than the biggest. Right?
So we're setting 2 variables. Well, not 2 variables, but we're setting. Oh, you kind of confused me here.
Yeah. I think when we
So
code, it'll be a little easier, but we're creating a
okay.
condition that compares, is the building greater than 0?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Correct.
And is the building greater than what our current value for biggest is?
Okay.
So we're starting at 0. We're going to come here, right? We're going to iterate through. We're going to say, is this greater than 0? Nope. It's not, right?
No.
Is this greater than 0? Yeah. Is it
Okay.
greater than our biggest, which is currently set to 0? It is. Okay, so we're going to enter into my condition. We're going to do something, right? We're going to append value. So if true, append, so add value to, what am I adding it to? What am I returning back to them?
Are we returning back to 0?
No, we're
So
returning, remember this returns a new list. So if it passes my parameters, it's greater than 0 and it's greater than the biggest, meaning I can see it. Then I want to add it to my new list of buildings that I can see. So I'm say visible buildings. I'm also going to say biggest equals now equals value. Right? Thinking about this. If I'm starting at 0, is -1 greater than 0? No, so it doesn't matter. Is this one greater than 0? Yes. And it's greater than biggest, which is currently set to 0. So I'm going to add 1 to my new list. And then my biggest is 1. So then when I get to this one, it's going to say, is this greater than 0? Yep. Is it greater than biggest? No, it's not greater. It's equal to, right? So I'm not going to add it. And then I go to 7. Is that greater than 0? Yep. Is it greater than my current biggest? Yes. Right? 7's greater than 1. Okay, let's add it. I go to my 3. Is that greater than 0? Yes. Is that greater than my current biggest of 7? No. So I skip it. And then my for loop is done.
Okay, I see. I see what you did there. Okay.
There we go. So then at the end, all I do is return visible buildings. Right? I'm just giving my list back. Okay. So let's code this out. Let's get rid of this. All right. So using my pseudocode, I want you guys to tell me what to type. So Kevin, why don't you hit me with line 1?
DEF,
Yeah. We'll call this skyline.
skyline,
Skyline
parentheses,
heights. Parentheses.
list. Just list,
Remember,
LIST.
remember, list is a keyword, so we have to do something like some list or
Oh,
listy
I
or something
see.
like that.
Listy.
Yeah, we'll do listy. Anything else? What do I need at the end of my function declaration?
Or maybe we could do like list_1, maybe.
We could do that. Remember, this function is going to be reused, so there's never going to be more than one list. But we could do list 1. That's okay. Whatever, we could call it unicorn or cupcake. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the last thing I need here? What am I missing?
Colon.
Exactly. And why don't you take the next line as well, Kevin? What am I doing?
Create a new empty list called visible buildings.
Uh-huh. So how am I going to do that?
Visible_buildings.
Yep.
Assignment operator, brackets for empty list.
Perfect. Great job. Yep. That's exactly it. All right. Jeffrey, how do I do this one?
We're gonna create variable called biggest.
Yep. And what am I
So
setting that equal to?
biggest is equals to so I said square brackets.
Not a square bracket. Remember, it's a number.
Oh.
Remember, we're starting at
0. Oh,
0, right? We're starting and saying, okay, I'm starting at ground level. So that's where we're going to start, right?
0.
Anything greater than ground level, we're good to go. Cool.
Okay.
And now you got the fun part. In Australia, you get the hard part. We're gonna start a list, or I want to iterate through this list 1. So how do I do that? Create my for loop for me. What's the keyword, Jeffrey, to start my for loop? And then Estrella, I'm gonna have you do this part.
Lovely.
So we're just creating a for loop. So I'm just gonna say, what's my big keyword for Python to know that it's a for loop? It's in the name.
X
For.
for
Remember, for is our keyword. See how it's purple? Once Python reads it, it says, oh, I need to do a loop. So I'm saying for.
yeah, loop to interpret.
And then I'm iterating through the buildings. What did Kevin create that keeps track of my buildings that I'm going to be passing in my function call? What do we call it?
The list
List one,
one,
right? Yeah. So I'm going to say for,
list
and
one,
each number represents what?
a building,
Yeah. So I'm going to say for, exactly. I'm going to say for building in list
and
one. Good job. Perfect. Okay.
and
So building's going to represent each value as I iterate through my list one, and list one represents when my function is called, represents this list right here. Cool. All right. The showstopper.
Alrighty, here we go. Okay, so we'll write
Yep.
if building
Uh-huh.
is, let me see, greater. Hold on,
Yeah.
let me look right quick. I'm looking. Yeah, if it is greater than 0, yeah, I was gonna say greater than 0. And hold on, if it's greater than 0, it's not equal to. Then, okay, if it's greater than 0, then you put the colon,
Okay.
then it'll be print biggest, no, it'll be list 1, right? Hold on, look. Print, it's got to print, yeah, it's got to print in list 1. And then if greater than biggest, if building is greater than, hold on, I'm trying to think. Because it's not great, it's not greater than equal to.
Mm-mm. You had it right at the first part.
Okay, if building is the biggest, then it will print again to list 1.
Okay.
Okay.
Think that's going to work?
Hold on. I don't think so.
Okay. We're getting a couple squigglies.
Yeah, that's why.
Let's hover over expected expression. Expected. Okay. Can anybody see what's wrong here? We got an extra word in here.
Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm. What in here is the extra word?
Is.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So now I'll take this one.
Oh, easy for you.
Easy for me. Once I'm out of my
I'm
for
just
loop,
playing.
I
I'm playing.
return visible buildings. Okay. So let's see if this works And then we go and rework it, right? If this doesn't work, then we'll see what we have to do. We'll kind of go back, reassess. And we can try to work it. Okay. So moment of truth. We wrote our function.
They wrote the same thing.
Wrote the same thing every time.
Why
Yep.
is that?
Let's go back up here.
It has to be on my portion.
Did we follow our pseudocode? So we created a
Um,
condition that compares if the building is greater than 0. Yeah, we did that.
Mm-hmm. And then I am
So something
thinking.
interesting. Let's think about it. We'll figure out what happened here. There is only 5 values in here, right?
Yes.
I have got 8 printing ones here. So what does that mean? That means that it printed 3 extra times. So we could look at our prints and say what's going on. Also, I think it would be helpful if we went to our pseudocode and tried to figure out, did we follow this correctly?
I'm thinking because we only wrote the variable for biggest. Did we have to put another variable? Maybe.
We didn't. Let's look at this portion right here. We said if it's true, we want to append the value to visible buildings. What are we doing if it's true?
We were printing to list 1 versus visible buildings.
Now, one thing to remember, printing 2 is not the same thing as adding. There is no such thing as printing 2. All this is doing is printing the value that was passed in here. It's not adding or doing anything. It's just printing the value that was passed in, which explains why you would think we would have 10 of these, right? Because there's 2 print statements and there's 5 numbers. But if we think of the first one, if building, which is -1, is greater than 0, well, it's not, right? So it does not print. If building is greater than biggest, well, it's not, so it does not print. So it skipped this first one, and then the rest of these, for each one of these, all it did was print the value passed in. What we want it to do is to take that value, if it's true, and we want it to append to our visible buildings. Now, doing it for 2 of these can get a little bit complicated, right? We don't want to double up our work. So what we can do is actually take this code out. We could put and, which now both of these have to be true in order for this to work. And we could say building is greater than biggest. So now this is saying, hey, both of these conditions have to be true. Then what we're doing is we're appending the values. So I'm going to say visible building dot append. And what am I adding? I'm adding building. Right? I'm saying, oh, cool, now it's good. If it's in here, that means it's also greater than my biggest. So I could say biggest equals building. And now this should get us our 1 and 9. 1, 3, and 9, actually. So if I come here. Whoa. Let's see. Oh. Anybody see what's happening right now? Remember, it's running my function, but do I have any print statement?
No, you deleted them.
I deleted them, right? So it was running my function, but if I want to see what it returns, which is my visible building, I just have to run print. I had to put print around my function call. And now I get 1, 3, 9. If I were to take this value up here.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused about something.
Yep, give me just 1 second. And I were to take this value. And again, I do print. We get our 1 and 7. All right, Kevin, what's up?
So, you're assigning the 0 to the biggest.
We're just
Why?
starting that at the beginning.
Okay, so that's okay. Because
That's
so that represents the index of 0, which is the first.
no. This represents we're on street level. So we're starting at 0
Okay.
and we're implying anything greater than street level is going to be right. That's kind of our baseline is we're on street level. And so we can know that in our function, we're saying anything greater where we are starting. So anything greater than 0 is going to now be my biggest. So if it's 100 or if it's 8 or 1, it's now going to be my biggest. That's why I'm starting at 0 because that's what I'm saying. Anything greater than street level. But right now, street level is all we have.
Okay.
I have a question, Will.
Yeah, of course.
So you know how you put if building greater than 0 and building greater than biggest? So
Mhm.
I was kind of thinking of having it on the same line because I remember, like, I know we're in Python, but in JavaScript you can do
Yeah.
the
And
what is
signs.
it, the and signs. Yeah, that's why I was like, but because we've never talked about it and it's a different language, or I was kind of like, I separated them, not realizing
Yeah.
that we could combine them.
Yeah, we
Okay.
talked about it very little. We could do and that means both of them have to be very true, or not very true. They have to be true. So this has to be true and this has to be true. Or, which in JavaScript was like that. And
Correct.
then JavaScript had this one where either
Yeah.
one could be true.
Mhm.
Python, you just write or. They operate the
Okay.
same way though.
Okay. But it has to be written out
Yeah, it
only
has
in
to be written
Python.
out as
Okay.
an
Okay.
and or an or.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, but still you're assigning the 0 to the biggest. So if building is greater than 0 and building is greater than biggest, well, the biggest is 0,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? So what it's kind of like redundant.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Let's see if that just works. It's a great idea. Let's see if we can refactor that. See if it still works. Yep, that seems to work. Let's see if this works. Yep, still works. So you are right. We just refactored our code and we could just say, hey, as long as it's bigger than my biggest, because I know I'm starting at 0, then we're good to go. Because it doesn't matter if it's greater than 0 if it's not bigger than my biggest, right? And if this is 0, then we know that it can't be negative. So yeah, you're exactly right, Kevin. We could just do this. And this works just great.
Or we could replace biggest with just 0.
Here,
Yeah.
we couldn't do that because think about
Oh,
this,
right. No,
because we
you're
need
right.
to make sure. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, your refactor is great. Yep. I was sort of thinking the same thing. Glad that you brought that up.
It simplifies it a little bit more.
Yeah, very much so.
It does. I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
So do we just use dry over there?
Yeah. We didn't necessarily repeat ourselves, but we did a refactor and said, oh, there was some extra code that we didn't really need, right? So it's called refactoring. So that's great. Less code is better code, most of the time. Unless it becomes really unreadable, then it's a little bit harder, but. So this would be the answer. This is what you would look for, right? This is a way to do it. Now, just as a reminder, I know we got 3 minutes left. The reason we don't put our variable within our for loop is because now, remember, it's going to start and the first one's going to be fine, right? Because building's biggest is going to be 0 and it's going to check and it's going to say if building is greater than 0 than biggest, and it's not going to be, right? This -1. So it's fine. It's going to operate like normal. But then it's going to come back up here and it's going to say for building in list 1. So it's on this one. It's to say if building is greater than biggest. Well, it will be, right? 1. So we're going to append, and then biggest is going to be equal to building, which is going to be 1, right? But when we come up to our for loop, because this is on the inside, this is going to reassign that value. So we're going to get rid of that biggest that we're remembering, and biggest is going to go back down to 0. And so now every time we do this, this is bigger than, as anything that's greater than 0 is going to be added. So if I were to run this, you'll see now we get, oh, we actually get a error. Oh, you can see, yeah, this is never used. But if we come here, you see we get 1, 1, 3, 9. It's just really anything greater than 0. It's going to go into our thing. So we got to make sure that if we want to keep track of the true biggest, then we need to keep it outside of my for loop so it doesn't reassign that value or redeclare this, and we forget what is the actual biggest building. Cool. Any other questions on this? We're just at time. Any other questions, friends?
No, this was actually really good.
Yay.
Yeah, I like this. It was definitely less stressful than last time.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's going to get easier and easier and easier and easier.
Okay.
I will make sure that this one is up tonight. So we'll make sure that this recording is up right after this.
Appreciate it.
Of course. Of course.
Quick
Anything
question.
else, friends? Yeah, go ahead.
What's the best platform to practice algos? Is it the Algo book or you can recommend somewhere else?
Yeah, great question. So there's the Algo book. There's a platform called HackerRank.
Let me write that down.
Yep, a HackerRank. That you can go to, and they get a little bit harder, and they're not as there's not as much explanation. So HackerRank, there's one called Leet Code. You'll hear a lot about. So it's another way to sort of get your questions. And then with that, there's one called Neat Code that I like. And it's the same thing as Leet Code, but the guy will like algorithms and data structures for beginners. And so you can learn about stuff. I think there's like a pro, so you like have to have the pro thing, but you can learn about stuff. And then what's really nice is when you practice, you could do like basics. And then these are all from Leet Code, but He'll walk through the question and then the solution. So there's a whole video on the solution and then the code itself for you to do it, which is kind of nice. And then if there's submissions. So it's kind of, those are three: neatcode.io, leakcode.com, and HackerRank are three. And then obviously the algorithm book. There's lots of, I mean, this is something that people always struggle with. So there's lots of resources out there.
Good question, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. So
Absolutely. I would say to get started, make sure that you can do the algorithm app on the second part. Make sure you do the big, I think they're like the big 13 or big 12. Make sure you can do those. Because there's some of that stuff might be a little bit too advanced right now. But yeah. Okay. Well, I hope you guys have a great night.
You too. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Have a good one.